working? Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it, for you taking the time on a Saturday. We're going to be very respectful of your time today. So we said 9 to 1, and we're gonna stick to that. With that, when we get to the questions and those kinds of things, I'm sure you'll have them along the way. You might write them down, because you know what often happens in events like these or workshops like these, someone will stand up, you'll ask a 5-minute question, it'll lead to a 10-minute conversation, and in the 45-minute window that our presenters have to give you the important information that they want to deliver evaporates. So what you'll do is if you'll write your questions down when our presenters speak, question comes to mind, write it down. We'll collect those back from you, and then what we'll prepare is a Q&A document, so a question and answer document that we'll email back to everybody after this is over. So not only will you have the benefit of your question being answered, but you'll also have the benefit of everybody else's questions being answered. And our presenters have been kind enough to do that today. So my name is Ryan Johnson, and I'm the president of what's called the Missouri Alliance for Freedom. It's a very small nonprofit company that's committed to protecting and promoting individual, religious, and economic liberty in the state of Missouri. And we do that several different ways. And some of you have heard me talk at other events, but we do that several different ways. And one of those ways is that we spend a lot of time in Jefferson City. We have offices about a block and a half from the Capitol. And so when the Missouri legislature is in session between January and May, we're there. And we're there and we're in committee hearings, we're in the gallery watching the floor debates. We're listening, we're watching, we're trying to keep abreast of all that goes on. We're tracking bills. And so, for instance, last session in 2014, there were over 1,900 bills filed in the Missouri legislature, almost 1,900. Now, thankfully, only about 190 of those actually passed. But still, if you can imagine living under 200 new laws every single year, the Missouri legislature gathers in Jefferson City. As a guy who believes in limited government and individual liberty, it's kind of frightening. So one of the things that you will find if you spend any amount of time whatsoever in Jeff City, in the Capitol, is that there is quite literally an army of lobbyists. And that army of lobbyists is often dressed like me. They're well-spoken, they're well-informed, they know their issues, and they know their issues very well. They're paid to know their issues very well. And they also are very persuasive. And there's certain ways that they execute the function of their job, and a lot of that has to do with building relationships. They'll build relationships with staff, they'll build relationships with the members, they will become friends. And so all of a sudden it's not lobbyist and legislator having a conversation, it's two friends catching up over a cards game, or talking about family, or those kinds of things. And so that's why oftentimes you see so many bills that you're like, what are those people thinking advancing? So what do we need to do as a grassroots organization, as people who care about liberty, as people who care about freedom, people who care about limiting government? Well, we need to be as well informed, and we need to be just as capable in order to be able to lobby our agenda and our plan, even in the legislature. This is the first Missouri Alliance for Freedom Grassroots Lobbying Workshop, if that's what you want to call it, that we've had. So thank you very much for coming to the very first one. If we can repeat this several times a year throughout the state, look around you. We can build an army of grassroots lobbyists, so that when you get a call from us or an email from us, or if you get a call or an email from our friends at Americans for Prosperity or United for Missouri or one of the other conservative groups, you can take a day off, you can go to Jeff City, and hopefully make a difference. So that's the intent of today. With us, we've got Chris Howard. We'll be hearing from him here in a few minutes, and I'll introduce him when it comes time. You've got Janae Neustadt, who's here with us today. You've got Sean Grove, and the former senator and current chief of staff, Jim Lemke, should be joining us a little bit later. I also wanted to thank this guy back here on the camera. That's Dwayne Lester. He has one of the, and he just took a bite of food, so. He has a website that I go to every single morning. It's called the Missouri Torch. And it's what I would call the preeminent conservative blog in the state of Missouri. And if you don't go there every single morning to help find out what's going on, you really should. He is fearless, and it's been kind of a David and Goliath story. So I appreciate him driving here from Tarkio, Missouri this morning. If anybody knows where Tarkio is, it's in the most northwest part of the state. It's a little bit closer to Omaha than it is in Kansas City or here. So thank you, Dwayne. With that, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the why. Now that we've got the housekeeping announcements out of the way. Why are you here this morning? My guess is it's because you care about your government. My guess is it might be because you think maybe your government's on the wrong track and not doing the right things and that you want to make a difference. The reason that we picked the name Missouri Alliance for Freedom is really simple. I don't know what your issue is that maybe brings you to this thing called conservatism. Perhaps it's health care or national defense or fiscal issues and tax policy. Maybe it's life. Maybe it's Second Amendment issues. But it doesn't really matter, because whatever the issue is that brings you here today, it has a common theme. And the common theme is a loss of freedom. And that's grown exponentially over the last 6 years under the leadership of Barack Obama. I say leadership a little tongue-in-cheek. And with the vast overreach of the federal government, there's no better entity to push back against the federal government than the state. So we need to make sure that the state is doing the right things. Now, I'm lucky, blessed enough to be able to do this full time, but it took a while to get where we were. But still, you all are making a sacrifice being here this morning. I haven't seen my kids in 3 days, and I've got a daughter, 2 daughters, 5 and 7 years old, Lily Madeline and Abigail Rose, and they're my whole heart. And I'm missing a lot. I missed dance class the other night, and you do the same things. You have to sacrifice if you want to advance the ball. If you want to protect the liberty of my daughters, your daughters and sons, and your grandchildren, then we have to engage in the fight. You know, it was Billy Graham once said in one of his famous crusades years and years ago, you know, those ones that he would fill stadiums with people to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. He said, and it was towards the end, he said, indecision is a decision in and of itself. And if you don't decide, time always decides against you. Paraphrasing his quote. So you have to decide that you want to be engaged. You have to decide every single morning when you wake up that you're going to get up and that you're going to fight for this thing called liberty. And that's why the Missouri Alliance for Freedom exists. That's why we're here this morning. That's why I missed my kids for the last week. And that's why you're here today, too. So I really appreciate you being here. My journey, just so that you know, into conservatism was just that. I was raised in a liberal household. My mother, God bless her, voted for Barack Obama twice. My younger brother, sometimes I say little brother, but he's 6'6", so he's not that little. I'm 6'8", by the way. That's the first question people ask me. But I was raised in a liberal household. And after my dad left, when I was 10 years old, I didn't see him much again. And I was raised by a single mother and my brother. And she worked 12 hours a day. And so when I was 17 years old, I remember seeing Bill Clinton on Arsenio Hall playing the saxophone with a pair of sunglasses and thinking that was pretty cool. And had I been allowed to vote, I would have been a vote for Bill Clinton that year. Thankfully, I wasn't allowed. I joined the military when I was 18 years old and served in the 1st Cavalry Division, which is a rapid deployment unit based out of Fort Hood, Texas. It's an armored division. I was what they call a combat engineer, which is essentially an infantryman that knows how to blow things up. I did that for 3 years. But in a combat arms rapid deployment unit, it's your responsibility to be able to deploy anywhere in the world within 72 hours, engage the enemies of the United States, and defeat them. And that was our job. Thankfully, we were never called upon to really do it. When I went into the military in 1993, we still had what was Ronald Reagan's military, the one that he had built and that H.W. Bush had maintained. And then towards the end of that military had really gone downhill. And so that really kind of led me to become a little bit more conservative. Now, I was 5th generation Army. My grandfather from Ferguson, Missouri, was a retired Major General before he died, and he was probably the only conservative influence in my life. But that military experience really helped shape my worldview. But what else helped shape my worldview was my exposure to a guy named Jesus. We weren't raised in a household with it. We had a Bible on the bottom shelf on the right-hand side in the living room. It was never opened. Prayer was never something that we had in our house. And I don't know if I'm talking to a religious crowd or not today, but I'm just telling you what my experience was. And I can remember being 10 or 11 shortly after my father left, and there was mid-'80s, there was a mini-series called Jesus of Nazareth that was filmed in the late 70s, and if you ever give it a watch on YouTube, it looks like it was filmed in the 70s, but it was pretty good. And I can remember hearing this actor recite the Sermon on the Mount for the very first time when I was about 10 or 11. I was sitting in my living room listening to this as a 10-year-old kid with the tears streaming down my face, touched by what was the gospel of Christ. And so as I grew in that into about my early mid-20s, I became what's called a social conservative, what people call a social conservative, and became very pro-life. And so at first I was kind of this national defense and social conservative. But then as other problems arose, fiscal issues, taxes, so on and so forth, education, I always kind of try to go back to, well, what's the conservative answer to this problem? Because right now in the state of Missouri, I'll tell you, we have what's called a life and a guns Republican Party. And so if you think that you can just vote Republican and send them to Jeff City or DC and be okay, you're sadly mistaken. Normally they will vote correctly on life and guns, but that's about all you can rely on them for. Once it gets into issues like education, once it gets into issues like taxes, tax credits, crony capitalism, you name it, everything's on the board. It's a large battlefield in terms of the issue spectrum that we face. We need to hold the line on life and guns, but we need to turn the conversation within the conservative movement onto some other issues as well and start reminding our legislators that they need not act like progressive liberals. If they call themselves conservatives, as they campaign as conservatives, if they come into your districts and say that they believe in limited government, individual liberty, smaller government, then you have to hold their feet to the fire. And that is the only way that we will advance the ball. So with that, I really appreciate you coming today. We have kind of a YouTube video, maybe kind of inspire you a little bit. Yesterday was President Ronald Reagan's birthday. I don't know if we have any Reagan fans in the room this morning. Me too, me too. But you can watch this, it'll be about 3.5 minutes, and then we'll introduce our first speaker.